And it is always fun to talk to people that are in dual clubs. And by show of hands, how many of you have seen this presentation before? So we only have one that hasn't. What we're going to do is something a little different because, we don't want to bore you with the same thing over and over. Although a very famous world champion of public speaking, David Brooks, once said, repetition plus restatement gets people to remember. And so you folks may be guides next time, so you may be teaching this. You probably will to your other members. But we thought we would do something a little bit different, show some of the program, but have more of a conversation with you because you folks really, because you're in two clubs, really get it. And like me, you're probably a junkie. I used to be in 4 clubs at one time. That was insanity. I've started 6 clubs. I know how fun it is. I know the rush of it. And I know the work that's involved. So I appreciate you folks taking the time to do this. So Hugh is your ambassador. And the ambassador is different than the guide. And Hugh Curley, I have in one of my clubs, the Liberty Toastmasters North. And Hugh always inspires me because he's an engineer. And he's a process guy. And I'm a sales guy. And in Pathways, as I told John earlier, we're switching positions. So I get to be the engineer and he gets to be the sales guy. So I'd like to welcome up Mr. Hugh Curley, Distinguished Toastmaster.
Thank you. So, following on what Brad just said, you discover that I, as the ambassador, am the inspiration and he is the perspiration. When I first became an ambassador, I was told that I had to visit each of the clubs once and tell them about Pathways. And they gave me a PowerPoint, and a script, and everything else to do it, so it looked to me like my job was extremely easy. Then he has to go through with some virtual meetings, and he has to answer everybody's questions and stuff like that. So from the very beginning, it looked to me like he did the work, and I got the credit. And I'm thinking, that's okay. Well, I find out later that that's not what happens, that I have to go to visit each of the clubs, and this is club number 9, our last one. So you get the benefit of all the learning that I have done in the previous ones, if any.
Okay.
And I also have to touch base with every club 3 times after the rollout. So that could be email, it could be a conference call, it could be I come visit. This club I will probably visit, the one in Fort Morgan I probably won't. That's what I'm going to be doing now to get the message out. And one of the reasons that Brad and I are doing this, and both of us are doing it for the same reason, is that in the past, when there have been changes, they haven't gone as smoothly as they should, or they haven't gone as smoothly as they could. Sometimes people get information in advance, and they go around saying, I know something that you don't know, I can't tell you, and things like that. And what that does is not really put that person in a higher position mentally in your mind, or my mind, but a lower, because what they're doing is they're acting very childish, power play for children on something like that. And so Toastmasters wanted to bring this out in a steps methodology so that they could get some people introduced to it, and then other people introduced to it, and other people introduced to it. Whenever you start trying to introduce something to 300,000 people across 100 and some countries, speaking more languages than what we can count, it really is difficult to roll it all out. So we have to roll it out in groups, and that's what they're trying to do here. And our group now is Region 1. They're going to be rolling it out, hopefully on March 20th. Maybe if they don't get enough clubs visited by then, it'll be a little bit later, but that's the goal that they're trying to work with right now. But we want to make sure that you understand what it is, what's happening, and why are we doing this, and to look forward to the rollout with a positive or at least a neutral attitude. Because, as I've told every club that I've been in, any organization that is successful, such as Toastmasters has been, except government organizations, started with a person that had an idea, and he or she brought other people, friends or co-workers, that liked that idea together and got started on that idea. And with Ross Smedley in 1924, he started the Toastmasters organization with businessmen that met in a YMCA. And the forum, and that's what it is, that's what Toastmasters still is a forum, was to give speeches and then get feedback, get evaluation. That's what it started with. That is the core of Toastmasters. And through all the changes that Toastmasters has made through the years since 1924, the one thing that has remained constant is that core, and that is why Toastmasters has been successful. Or should I say that is half of the reason that Toastmasters has been successful. Currently, what is Toastmasters? It is a forum where you go and give speeches and you get feedback. What is it going to be under Pathways? It is a forum where you give speeches and you get feedback. And so that's why I believe that Pathways is going to be successful, is because we still adhere to this very successful, very workable core that Toastmasters had. What they started with, what they're doing now, what they're going to continue to do. On the other hand, the world changes. People change. And you have to be able to adjust to those changes. And I look at that as the drapings around that core, or maybe the envelope that's around that core. And when Toastmasters started, it was a single group. And as it was successful, more people came into that group, and so you're not doing as many speeches as you would like. So they broke it into two groups, and then more groups, and then more groups. And we call those groups now clubs, which does exactly the same thing that the original club does. Give speeches, get feedback. Some of the people that came in were not as versed as businessmen. They didn't know how to give speeches. They hadn't been giving speeches. So in 1940, Ross Smedley created the basic manual, which went through the steps to create a speech, the mechanics of giving a speech. It then became the CTM manual, and then it became the CC manual, competent communicator, competent Toastmasters, and then competent communicator. He was adjusting the clubs, he was adjusting the program, not the core, but the drapings, the envelope, to satisfy the needs of the people that were coming to it. As I said, this meeting was for businessmen. And as businessmen, we miss half of the ideas. We miss half of the population. We miss half of what we could have in here. And so they eventually allowed women into Toastmasters. And that is a right thing to do. And the interesting point on that, Helen Blanchard was our first female president. To become president of Toastmasters International, you have to be in a club, you have to hold a club office, you have to be club president, you have to hold a district office, you have to be district governor or district director. 2 years as a Toastmaster director, and then third vice president, second vice president, then runner-up, or president-elect, and then president. It takes a certain amount of time to do all that. If you look at the time that she became president and you back down all those steps that she had to go through, you find out that she was in Toastmasters before women were allowed. And there were a lot of women in there because people recognized the need to have women in the organization or to allow women in the organization. And the clubs recognized that, and so what they did is the women joined. If they had a name like Sam or Pat or something like that, it's gender neutral, or if not, they just used an initial. And so Toastmasters adjusted. Why do you do speeches? And the reason that you do speeches is to convince other people of your ideas, to let them think of your ideas so that they can get a different viewpoint. You give speeches to try to get people to see things in your way. And what is that called when you get people to think your way? It's called leadership. And so what happens is that we have now giving speeches, and we have a path on that called the communication path, and we have another path called leadership. And so that was another adjustment that Toastmasters made. About 8 years ago, they came up with a motto of, what was that motto they came up with about 8 years ago? Where leaders are made. And so that was another adjustment. Did they change the core? No, but they did change the draping. They changed the focus a little bit. And they have the communication path and they have the leadership path. And you go through both of those and you become a distinguished Toastmaster. But the problem is on that, is how many different paths can you take, how many different adjustments can you have in your competent communicator, advanced communicator path to become a distinguished Toastmaster. And you have a little bit of variation because you have to do 6 manuals in the advanced, and there are 15, so you can select the 6 that you want to do. But that still is restrictive. And how about for the leadership? When you go through the leadership path, you have to do this, you have to do that. We don't have a grammarian, do we?
Nope.
Okay, good. So you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do the next thing. And there ain't no options. So what we are doing here is that we are developing pathways where you, who want to do presentations, can focus on presentations. They're taking the leadership path and the communication path and they're melding them together, and then they're breaking it out into 10 different pathways. And so in your presentation pathway, you've got some presentation, a lot of presentation, and some leadership in that. You want to be a leader. So you go to the dynamic leadership path, or one of the others, and there's some communication in there, and there's a lot of leadership in there, but it's focused on that. So that's the idea that we're doing here, is we are devising a program that is flexible for the individuals. And one other thing. We were just talking about that over here in this corner a couple of minutes ago. Toastmasters is finally going to enter the 21st century. We're going to go online. How many of you like to kill trees? 2 days ago, we just did a presentation in Boulder. This is not a good idea to kill trees down there. So you can do everything online. You do not have to have paper books. You do not have to have paper evaluations. You can do everything online. And by the way, how many of you have ever lost a book? Especially after you have 9 of the 10 projects completed. Well, what happens if you do the evaluations online, or if you do the rest of the project online? Toastmasters has a record of all of that. And so when the dog eats the book, or you move, or something like that, Toastmasters has that record. When I asked about who wants to kill trees, we had one person up here.
Yeah, Brad.
And wait till you see what he's done. He'll show you. He likes that. So can he continue to go on Toastmasters with the paper books, paper manuals, paper evaluations? And the answer is yes. It's there. And so, have at it, Brad. Because you can do it the way that you need to. It is flexible that we're working with right now. So I am supposed to show you a presentation, and we will go through this presentation. How many people have seen this presentation before? All right, so what we will do is we will go through it at the appropriate speed, okay? Maybe we will. Okay, so this is Toastmasters. There's the basic manual, the CC and the CL, the current system, and then we have the interpersonal. And then we go on here. We have these 5 competencies that we learned today. The 5th one, number 5, confidence, is not taught. It is learned by you as you do the other 4. When we go to the 10 pathways, it has them listed up here, and then in the little blocks underneath, it shows which competencies they focus on of the current competencies. Now, as we move forward, we're going to have a bunch more competencies that we're going to work on, such as doing podcasts and doing online meetings and some, all the other things, to enter the 21st century. Now here, if I ask the question, and I usually do ask the question in a meeting, what is an ALS? And most people have absolutely no idea. Some realize that it is a disease, and others say that it's a sign language, which is actually ASL. So, but the advanced leader silver, where does that fit? Is that in the communication path, or is that above or below or different from the ACG? Yeah, I don't know. Separate paths, she says. Okay. But I can't remember, and whenever somebody comes into the meeting, I can remember very well, but I'm just pretend I can't. When somebody comes into the meeting, new, and you start dropping a lot of TLAs on them, that's 3-letter acronyms, they're not going to have any idea what's going on. They're going to be confused. They're going to be, this is too complex for me, and they're going to be gone. So what Toastmasters has done is simplified the progression. It is called, Todd, are you ready for this?
Yes.
Okay, it is called level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5. Do you have that? Can you follow that?
Yes.
All right. I'm poking fun at it, but it's just a lot simpler, and people can pick it up. Every path has the 10 levels, and the first one is mastering the fundamentals. What do you do today in Toastmasters on speaking and leadership? You do the CC and the CL manual. You master the fundamentals. We're still doing that in Pathways. By the way, the meetings do not change at all in Pathway. And I just stole some of Brad's stuff. The next thing you do is you learn your style. Toastmasters is not trying to change you, but they are trying to get you to enhance what you do well, your individualism. To enhance that so that you can become a better speaker. You increase your knowledge and your skills, levels 3 and 4. And then you demonstrate your expertise. So those are the 5 levels that you go through, and each pathway has those 5. And you'll notice here, this icebreaker, the evaluation and feedback and researching and presenting, those are projects that you're going to be doing, and the projects will probably be the same on all of the pathways. But you get over here on level 2, it says 2 required projects. For one pathway presentation, those 2 projects will be specific for presentation. For your leadership, those 2 projects will be specific to leadership. Right? Over here we have 1 required project and a minimum of 2 elective projects. Now there's a total of 59 projects right now that you can work on. And the required project is, if you're in this pathway, you'll do this one, but you have 2 elective projects that you can work on as well. So they guide you on here. So 59 projects, and it shows them, and it shows the languages. Over here, the 8 languages. English has everything online, and I was told recently that they have, half of them are in paper. I expect that in English, everything will be in paper also. As you go down the list, you get fewer and fewer of them in paper and fewer of them online yet. But they're continuing to develop this. And by the way, there are 10 pathways. 2 more pathways, I understand, are going to be coming out before the end of the year. So, and they will continue to develop projects, so develop pathways as we move forward. To try to be current with what we are doing, with the way the world is changing. Now, we all like to get recognition, and Pathways is no different. As you finish each level, you will get an electronic badge. And for level 1, you get a badge that says 1. Okay, you got that one, Todd? You got that figured out?
Yeah.
And level 2, 3, 4, and 5. But the nice thing about this is they have other badges as well. And so as you see somebody has done something in the club that has really been good, you can recommend them for a badge. And they have some of these badges already identified. Not who's going to get it, but what the badge is. And so you can recommend somebody for a particular badge, and that will go into their permanent record.
What are the 4 badges?
Those 4
you're
that
showing?
courageous, outstanding.
Okay.
I don't remember, they told us the third one, but I don't remember that one. But we don't know
I have
which
no
one's
idea.
which yet.
Really courageous and really
Amazing.
I think one of them is discerning.
Okay.
We haven't got that one yet.
So I am an ambassador. I know nothing about this. Brad can get into the base camp to a certain level. I can't even get into that base camp to that level. So once I am done here and sit down, you will know everything I know about pathways. And one of the things I don't know is what those badges stand for. Okay? Evaluations is an area where Toastmasters has been really strong in the thoughts and where the core projects and all that. But sometimes the evaluations are just a little bit weak. So they're trying to work on that and come up with 3-page evaluations instead of 1 page. The first page is the italics that's on the top of the current evaluation. And then you have an evaluation that has these different characteristics with the numbers 5 through 1. And with you, I want to make you feel good, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all 5s, and that's safer, and so he really likes that. But did you learn anything from it? And the answer is no. Besides, what does a 5 mean?
High five.
High five. So the third page on this evaluation defines what each of those mean in each of the different categories. And so I can take a look at that and I can say, you know, on vocal variety, he did use the speed and the tone and all those things very well. They were tools that you used and you used them well. But to perfection, no. I think that you could do just a little bit better. So I give you a 4 on that instead of a 5. And I can and he's crying. And I can justify that by giving some examples as to why I didn't give you a 5 and also why I didn't give you a 3. So we can talk about that later. Let's have coffee afterwards, okay?
Yeah.
So mentors is another place where Toastmasters should be really strong, and they really try to be strong. And I have seen some mentor programs that have worked very, very well, and I've also seen some that did not. What we're doing in here is trying to make the mentor program work. And I will say this, in order to have a mentor program work, you must A, have a good mentor, somebody that wants to do it, somebody that knows what mentoring is, and this teaches that. B, a mentee that wants to be mentored and wants to do something and knows how to go about doing it, and this will teach that as well, and then a relationship between them. All right? So they're going to be, oh, and you have a badge. And I do know what that one is. And with that, I see that our cameraman back there has been looking at his watch, and so I guess my time is up. So what I will do now is turn this control of this meeting over to the person that knows everything and is going to help you bring it along with the details, Mr. Brad Beck, DTF.
I don't know everything. Actually, I know nothing. Reminds me of a story. I have 3 granddaughters. I was standing at the Mike Herb Center in Nashville. My son had just gone through law school. We're waiting for everybody to go to the necessary room. There's a plaque commemorating the Apollo astronauts. And my granddaughter at the time, about 9 years old, Libby, was standing in front. And I said, Libby, who was the first man on the moon? And with enthusiasm, she said, Louis Armstrong. Well, she got it half right. Reminds me when I started in Toastmasters, I only got it half right. I remember, do you remember that first time you went to your first meeting? Besides shaking like a leaf. I got the manual. That night I went home and read the whole CTM manual. Thought I knew it all. Then I came to my first meeting and found out that, quote, experts who had been there for a lot longer knew a lot more than I did, even though I had read the manual. And so it reminded me of this Pathways program. And the reason I say that is, I applied to be a Pathways guide. They foolishly accepted me. And then I got these links to this website. And there was 3 little buttons. So I clicked them all, thinking there'd only be 3 different things that I'd have to look at. Well, as Hugh alluded to earlier, I'm one of these people that like to print stuff out. So I did. And I kept printing and printing and printing and putting files together. One, my office is in the People's Republic of Boulder, and the power often goes out, like weekly when the wind blows. So when you're online, oftentimes when you're looking stuff up, it goes down. So believe it or not, it's crazy. I'm at the end of Arapahoe and Ebonfine Park, and it's amazing to me that a city like Boulder, with all the technology, the electricity goes out as often as it does. That said, I wanted to be ready when people ask me a question. The thing is, I haven't read the whole thing. It's too much. But what is really cool is there's a master Q&A, which we'll get to in a moment, that has questions and then answers that other regions have been asking as it's rolled out. And the dirty little secret about this new Toastmasters Pathways program is there's a thing called Google. And you can find out what everybody else has been doing. So Hugh and I have been kind of laughing at this whole program because as we go through, people have been, well, what about this? What about that? How are you going to handle this? And we've been going online and asking the questions in the appropriate channels. And then there's the reality where you Google and everybody says, well, not so much. So it's a combination of both that we have kind of been exposed to. And as we have done these presentations, we're learning a lot because people are asking the questions. So the particulars of this program. Where will this program take you? Well, first of all, we have a guide, if you will. It's called the Navigator. So every new Toastmaster will get this, so I'm going to call it the Bible, the Quran, the whatever you want to call it. This is where all knowledge will exist on basic Toastmasters programs. And in it, there are things like how to start a meeting, what the roles are, what the paths look like with more information in it, which is important. The other thing that we have is choosing your path. You can declare whether you want paper or whether you want to go electronic. And then there'll be this place called home, base camp. Base camp is kind of like when you're going hiking in the mountains and you're going to climb Mount Everest. You're not going to haul all your food, all your water, all your necessities up there. You've got a base camp, a place where everything lives. And that's what this program will have for us. So let's go to, I always point at the screen and go, really? No, I got to point to the computer. The Navigator, again, you'll have an electronic copy of this being sent to you via your Vice President of Education through the miracle of the memory stick. So a PDF is on here with this Navigator and all the basic information. Of course, you can, as a club or an individual, go online and buy one of these as well. So you have your own little piece of paper if you like it. And your Vice President of Education or your President will get this and anoint you with that holy grail. So you have it. You probably have two now, right? If you lose the first. Yes, this sword. Yeah, exactly. So then let's go here to the first thing you're going to do. You're going to choose your path. Now, as Hugh mentioned before, there are 10 paths currently in the program. Let's say you start a path and it's not what you expected it to be. You can say, I don't like it. Within 30 days, you can switch to a different path, absolutely free. Every Toastmaster will get one free path. If you're in 2 clubs, all of us, you get 2 paths. If you're in 3 clubs, you get 2. Stingy people. But you can buy all 10 paths if you wish. And several clubs have said that'd be a great idea so we can see what's in there. The problem with that is you can't necessarily go through each level in each path. You can see it, but you got to do level 1 from what I've read before you can go to level 2. So you can have them, but unless you finish them, you really can't go there. So again, Google has almost everything that people have gone through, which is really cool. You can see what's in each one of those paths. So then, let me go back. Choose your path. You can say and declare whether you want to do it electronic or if you want to do it in paper. And then decide if you want printed material. So you can do both. You can buy the path, get the free one, and then buy the printed if you want it. Or you can just print it down yourself as well. Then you take the assessment. I'm really afraid of this. I probably will be off the charts when I take my assessment. But it will tell you, based on your questions and your answers, things like these, what paths that you may want to take. For instance, I may come up with, based on the answers, that it says I want to do dynamic, or I should recommend do dynamic leadership. I want to do public speaking. Can I change? Absolutely. This is just a recommendation. So there's 3 up here, there's another 7, so a total of 10 right now. As you mentioned earlier, there'll probably be humorous speaking and storytelling by the end of the year. I'm sure they'll do the Better Club series, the Better Speaker leadership. They'll keep enhancing and changing as we go along with this program. So then you get your navigator, you choose your path, you go to base camp, and this is where I've had the most fun, going into base camp and just exploring. This program is so rich with resources, it's amazing. I've gotten into probably 2 or 3 of the different areas, kind of looked at the videos, it's amazing. And what I think will be a benefit to all of us is you'll have the opportunity when somebody says, well, how do you do that? You can send them a link. Right now, you'd have to spend the time to sit down and go through it. By the way, how many of you do orientations in your club? Or any club that you're in? They're tough to do, aren't they? I mean, you gotta find the time. I have found usually if you give them an hour, you know, it's like, you look at your watch, it's 2 hours later because they have questions and they wanna do it. I think the orientation is very helpful for new Toastmasters because it gets in their mind what they can do with the program. As I've always said, Toastmasters is the skeleton. You have to put your own meat on the bones. And by putting your own meat on the bones, it's customizable. Well, I don't know if that's a word, customizable. Where's the grammar?
Yes, it is.
It is, okay. Sounded good in my head. In the new program, it's much more customizable to where people can really get out of it. For instance, in most jobs, in most locations today, people have to know how to use social media. There's a path that has more social media, but a lot of programs in the electives are social media based. There are things like how to make a podcast, how to write a blog, all real world skills that we all need today to succeed in our businesses. So I think from that standpoint, it's going to be huge. Plus, what I found out the other day, we were in Lafayette, one of the, Michael Deal, who's the president of that club. He went online and started figuring out that out of the Fortune 500, over half of those organizations have Toastmasters clubs associated with them, which I found amazing. With this new Pathways, I think we're going to see that explode. So there's a lot of opportunities that we're going to see with this new program. So, yes, sir.
Would you see this process of this would be something that would be done when you have a visitor who says, I want to sign up? I'm picturing.
You mean this program?
Yeah,
You could.
I'm picturing the VP of membership and the treasurer gathering around in front of a laptop and taking them through the assessment and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
Well done.
I think that'd be a benefit to your clubs, benefit to the member. I always have found, as I alluded to earlier, when I went to that first club and I was asking questions, people said, I don't know, and then I would go try to find it myself. And it wasn't until I became a distinguished Toastmaster, I said, yes, there's got to be a better way. So I started sitting down with new members and doing the orientation and found that we had a higher retention rate of members by doing that. Because there's type A's like me and then there's normal people. So yes, I think that would be a great opportunity for you. So the navigator, we talked about a little bit. This is something that I want to pass out to y'all. And that is a word, because my wife's from the south, y'all.
Y'all.
Thank you. Pass these this way, you can pass them down. So what this shows, and what you have up there, is where we are today and where we're going in the future. So today you have your club meeting, has an agenda, meeting roles and speeches, but Pathways, that doesn't change. All of the roles will stay the same. You'll have your Toastmaster, table topics, grammarian, timer, and you'll get credit for those as well. You sign up for a speech and receive evaluation. You'll do that, but it'll be even more robust. And as you talked about with the evaluations as well, a question was brought up to us the other day about how are you going to do that? And as I looked and did some research, it says, quote, the resource that you are provided by the speaker. Well, the resource could be paper, so you could download the evaluation and hand it like you do today to your evaluator. You can send an electronic link, and they can download it, or they can bring their own tablet, give you an evaluation, and send it back to you. Or you can get on your tablet or your laptop, hand that to your evaluation. There's blanks, they can fill it out, upload it. It's in your, quote, permanent record now. So once we get used to this, like anything new, I think it's going to be a lot more effective and efficient for all of us as members. Plus, if you get to that point where you have your manual or your path, and you've done 5 or 6 or 7 speeches, and you lose the thing, you've got a recording that you did it. I'll be honest with you, there's a little more work for the Vice President of Education or the base camp manager in the beginning. It's a learning curve. But once they, the secretary and the president of the club, play around with the process a little bit, there's a checkoff after each one of the projects. So there's a little bit more work initially, but I think once we get used to that, it'll be second nature like anything else. I remember the first time I went on to Twitter and Facebook and all the social media and tried to learn what is it about. You know, you put something out there. In fact, I remember the first time I put something on Twitter and I did a link that said whitehouse.org. Don't ever do that. There are certain pictures that you want to share with other people that you get accused of being a
That's no longer true.
Well, it's not, but back in the day it was, and I had to delete the whole account. So it's a learning curve. You learn how to deal with what the program's about. Oh, I want to go back. You receive recognition, badges, and ribbons. That will still be here. Plus, there was one with the recognition for the company, for professional development. That will still be available. You have the icebreaker as your first speech, so you're going to introduce yourself to your members in the capacity of the path that you're going to be presenting. So if you're doing dynamic leadership, you want to do a speech based on that for your icebreaker. Same thing with all the other paths. Your Vice President of Education tracks everything. That will continue. In fact, for those that have clubs that have the paper tracking system, which we still do in our Liberty Toastmasters North, you have a visual representation. You can put it on the board at the end of the speech. You know, somebody writes their name on it in the speech they've done. And it kind of is an encouragement at the meeting to see where you are compared to your fellow Toastmasters. I always like that. Other members of us say, nah, let's get electronic and you can do it this way. So you can do both. And we would encourage you doing both paths parallel for the first couple years. In fact, the new program will be in unison with the existing program for 2 years after the last region rolls out, which means that probably the current program will be in existence probably through 2020. I'm saying conservatively. And that's if we hit all the targets for all the rollouts. Hopefully we will. Oh, and that's another thing. We have to get, as the ambassador and the guide, we have to do at least 70% of our clubs site visits, and then the Toastmasters International will roll out the program. The target date now is March 20th. If it doesn't hit March 20th, it might be rolling over to the following week, from what I've heard. But I think we're on track, if you've seen any of the updates that we had. Speeches last 5 to 7 minutes will stay the same, unless it's you and I talking, because we'll do a 20-minute Better Speaker series. Learn the competencies, right now 68, as I mentioned, going to over 300 competencies. And then one communication track, one leadership track. Now they'll meld those together. So we'll have the ability to work on both of them, but you won't have to remember to bring your leadership manual. It's part of the program. The Educational Distinguished Program, Club Program. Again, you'll have the existing program, you'll have the new path, the levels. Why would we want to keep the existing program if we're going to the pathways? Well, we got folks that are still working like you to get as Distinguished Toastmaster. Plus, if you're halfway through that manual, you want to keep working on that until you accomplish it. The one thing that Toastmasters will never do is take away your AB or your CTM, Able Toastmaster, Competent Toastmaster, or any of the other distinguished names that you have that you've earned in the current manuals or the previous manuals. It'll all be there. And then you'll go to the levels. I hope they have pins that say level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. I still have all my pins, my first ones. It's ridiculous. If you're a pin collector. We'll have support from all the district folks, from Hugh and myself. I'm going to be starting doing, in the first part of March, virtual trainings for the Vice President of Education, the Secretary Treasurer, if they want to chime in, or any of you. Basically, there'll be defined times. We'll do a Zoom, which is a software that we can use, which is kind of like a Google Hangouts. Have the opportunity to ask and submit questions. We'll look them up, give them back to you, do a little training, find out what your needs are for your clubs, And then we have to do at least 15 of those to get credit for the rest of this Pathways Guide program. So with that, I think the last one is how to get started. Well, we have this guide here also, 3 nifty little Pathways pins. I'll let you folks decide how you pass those along. I'm suggesting the first person in the club, the first 3, to go through a path, have a ceremony and award those, or you can go online and buy more love pins. And then there's all the other information that's here, the guide, the introductory letter, the pins, the memory stick with all the stuff on there. I'm sure most of you right now currently are online with Toastmasters International, by show of hands. All of you? Good. So you're already way ahead of the game. You do want to check your compatibility, which is up there, because there are a lot of pop-ups, a lot of videos, and so you want to make sure your computer's not blocking those. Yes.
Is there a particular browser that it works best with?
I have found Google,
Chrome, you mean?
Chrome, yeah.
Cool.
On Safari, sometimes, and it's weird. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Firefox has worked good for me. So I think it depends on your particular software. Yes, ma'am.
So now, instead of a DTM, there'll be a level 5
No,
Toastmaster?
great question. There'll still be distinguished Toastmaster.
Okay.
So if you complete 2 paths, you earn your DTM. But the DTM is in the new Pathways program as opposed to the current program. So that's the one thing that they're keeping. It does have a cachet. I believe there's less than 5% of all Toastmasters who have ever gone through the program have become distinguished Toastmasters. So I think it's still an honor to have earned that. And with the new Pathways, it's going to be, I think, a little bit more significant because there's more evaluation afterwards and a personal assessment. Did I really do it, or am I kind of phoning it in? Yeah, maybe I'll redo it. Because there's a proficient level in the new program, as opposed to checking off a box, in my mind, as I read it. It's a great question, thank you.
So,
Yes?
Brad, as I was reading what limited amount of information I have access to, it looked to me like after you do 2 pathways, and there is also several other steps that you have to do for the DTM.
Sure.
But right now, if you do the Advanced Communicator Gold and the Advanced Leader Silver, that is the DTM. With the new one, you'll have to do 2 pathways plus several other things.
There are, and I haven't gotten into the details of that yet.
Probably a
But-
district role.
Probably a district role, probably.
Yeah, you have to
Yes.
be an area director.
Director.
You have to do a youth leadership program or a speech craft. You have to coach a club.
That's similar to.
It's very similar to the current DTM requirements.
As Hugh has mentioned several times, this is not a revolutionary program. This is an evolution. You'll see in the different paths programs and speeches and leadership opportunities that are very similar and familiar to us today. They've just been uplifted into those new levels. So I think it's going to be familiar, feel comfortable, but a little different because there'll be more information, more resources available as well. Yes, sir.
Well, this is, are you
And I'm going to
about
go
done?
that slide, almost.
Okay,
Uh,
I'll ask a question at the end.
There.
Oh, here we go.
Now we're at the
Now I'm official.
So our club is an advanced club.
Correct.
And we're going to be discussing this as a club today. But I wanted to know your thoughts on the fact that we use a CC as a requirement for membership. And the idea behind that, I think, is that somebody's had persistent commitment, they've gone through something, they have some fundamental skills, and they've achieved a level that allows them to really benefit from the sort of advanced work that we're doing.
Correct.
And we're going to be talking about, of course, having an equivalent amount on the other side. So what are your thoughts on the equivalent amount of, what would we say, hey, this would be a good place to require people to get to before joining our club?
Great question. And so in doing some research and passed it on to you, what I found is what most folks with this type of club have, they're suggesting a level 2 to go through those 2 levels to be a requisite to join an advanced club like this.
Okay.
So
that's
that's
what-
what I have found from other regions.
That's good to hear.
Whether or not that's what you want to do, I think that's your club culture and you'll have to decide that.
Yep.
But I think up to that second level is probably a good idea.
Thanks.
Now, if there are people that are still wanting to use paper or are in paper, let them use the paper,
Right.
and that can apply for the next 2 years.
Sure.
But once March 20th or whenever the pull date is on the new program, any new member will have to only go on the Pathways program. That's the only choice they'll have. So,
Thanks.
yeah, well, that would be my recommendation. Other questions, concerns, diatribes? Yes.
Another point for our club
Sure.
is to get our second path, it won't just come up automatically. We'll have a place to email to request that, and so I'll be providing that to our club members.
Another question that has come up is, can I do a path in one club and then switch over to my other club that I'm in? They're recommending not, in fact, they're saying declare a club that is your home club for that path. And the reason they're saying that is, who is going to administer as the Vice President of Education?
Oh, that's true.
They won't know in this club what you did in that club, unless you get in touch with the Vice President of Education and say, I'm going to do this speech to this level in Club B, and Club B switches your path over, from what I've read. And that sounds screwy to
I
me.
guess what I've seen is you can go back and forth at any time. So whoever you want to mark off that project as completed, and then whoever you want to have get credit for that path, you can pick that. So what I've seen, you can go back and forth.
And that's what I've read, but then I go on to Google and hear what people have written, or read what people, and I'm getting conflicting viewpoints. So I submitted a question. We have, like every, I don't know if you've been on them, the trainings, the virtual trainings that the district has done, which, by the way, is moved to Douglas County already, so they got about half the office
Oh, good.
over here in Colorado finally. Although I called the other day and said, I haven't had my question answered. Can you give me somebody who did? And they were busy at the time, so there's still people in California in their transition. But if you know anybody's looking for a job, loves Toastmasters, then go down to Douglas County. So, but I'm waiting to hear that answer, because I'd like to get it definitive, because that's come up a couple times. So,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, we tend to really try to go first to our first clubs, our home clubs, but we do some of the work here, so.
Mhm. Sure. And I think it makes sense to do it that way, but I've read you have to declare your club, and that's your Vice President of Education. If they're going to switch anything, they need to be notified and check off on that before you can do it in another club.
Okay.
So
Fine.
I want to get clarity on that. Yes, sir.
So pathway rolls out, I join and declare a path.
Mhm.
Can I still finish up my old manuals of completing the ACS or something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll have 2 years from the last region rolling out to complete any paper that's in the current program.
But I could still be in pathways and.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to be doing that. I'm fairly close to getting a DTM, and so I'm going to continue on that. As soon as Pathway rolls out here in this Region 1, I'm going to start on the Pathways. As it turns out, I don't have any more speeches to do for my DTM, but I do have some leadership roles that I have to fill, so there won't be the conflict. But I will be doing both.
Yes, sir.
You were talking about doing speeches in the other club that you're in. There's also the problem of doing speeches at other organizations, which we can do, per manual, we can do 2 speeches at any non-Toastmaster organization, as long as there's a Toastmaster there that can evaluate it, per
Right.
manual. We still will be able to do that, and I don't know how.
So you can do that by, let's say in your work, you want to do a presentation, get credit for it. Again, you ask if there's a Toastmaster there, because it has to be live, can't be recorded, or you invite a Toastmaster to be there and do the evaluation and give it to you. So you can still do 2 outside. Now, they have virtual meetings or Zoom meetings or Google Hangout meetings. They'll be part of the program. So you can do an off-site Toastmaster meeting. In fact, I understand there's one club, the moderator is in Australia, but she's got members all over the world. So there's an international club happening through the computer, working, I don't know how they do it daytime, nighttime, but it's pretty interesting.